2018 to develop basically online books free that will cover every course in the chemistry curriculum. The goal was to have all these done within a 3-year grant period. Given COVID, and given the fact that most people are doing this as a side project, there'll probably be a year extension on this no-cost extension. My task is to work on a new biochemistry text. Now, some of you might know that I have one already that I developed when I was at St. Ben, St. John's. And I talked about this before at other meetings. I decided I was teaching there 32 years. I just didn't like the organizational structure of most books. So like everybody, I was going to write my own material. I started off doing that by posting images, then captions, and then it ended up being a book. And I started off the organizational structure with lipids because that makes most sense from what I'll call a biophysical perspective and complexity. Then we'll move to protein structure, and then increasingly complex carbohydrates and glycans, and then went to the elucidation of function, the first thing being binding, talking about binding. And then after binding occurs, the next possible logical thing would either be a kinetic transformation or transport, and then into more traditional sort of chemistry. The grant that I'm working on through Del Mar is to create a new book. The problem with the one I had, I used it for 30 years, but the thing is not everybody could adopt the framework that I chose. It's not a traditional format. And I didn't have all the ancillary stuff that other textbooks have. So I am working on a book with others, and it's going to be essentially what Del Mar would call a map of Lehninger. In other words, Lehninger is a very popular book. There's many popular biochem books. The idea is use the organizational structure of Lehninger to create basically free online resources and try to make them really useful, more useful than a traditional hard text, because in such an online text, you can make it interactive on the spot. So I just have a couple slides I want to show just for a couple minutes, and then we can chat a little bit about it. There'll be some like front matters and back matters, glossaries, indices in the front, but essentially the book is divided into 3 components, like Lehninger is. Structure and catalysis, which is how most biochem courses, especially those that are set up on a 2-semester basis, are set up. Unit 2 is bioenergetics and metabolism, and then 3 is information pathways. For instance, what I want to do is show some of the things I am doing. This book won't preview really for 2 more years, but some of the things that I think make this book uniquely suited for an online text with its interactivity. So I'm going to flip to chapter 5 on binding. And again, I follow Lehninger, we follow Lehninger somewhat loosely in that I've added sections, transformed it. All the writing is our own. Since this is a free online text, we're trying to make use of basically free material through Creative Commons. My book that was online, and it's still online, that's before this, I wrote everything. And it's a little hard for me, frankly, to use online Creative Commons material, but that's the way the book is going to get done as fast as it is. So one of the things you can do with an online book is put in interactive mathematical graphs. So here's a chapter on binding, the first step toward protein function. And there's basic equations and everything, but when you look at the basic saturation binding, hyperbolic binding showing bound ligand or macromolecular lipid complex is a function of free ligand, we now have graphs that are built in that allow you to change the dissociation or the total amount of macromolecule and the dissociation constant and look at the corresponding effects on the curve. So really a low KD, really tight binding. It almost looks like a titration curve. But presumably this will give students an ability by playing with these sliders to get a better feel for the function that's expressed here. After teaching for 32 years, I am really increasingly, I'm past teaching now, increasingly worried about the students' mathematical skills. Even though they come into school in class with AP calculus, simplest mathematics is difficult for them to seem to maneuver. Here's another example with kinetics. Now this section is not in Lemninger, but I said, how can you understand enzyme kinetics without understanding kinetics in the absence of enzymes? So I'd make some simple derivations. There are static graphs, but and I try to minimize the complexity. But again, by using interactive graphs, like for instance, in this one, we can look at the difference between a first order and a second order process in ways that it might illuminate to the students, one, how similar they are, and also there's discrete differences. And this is one I really like, because this is for the reversible reaction of A going to some product with some forward and backward rate constant. And if you ask students, given this particular equilibrium, for instance, to draw a graph of A and P as a function of time, and I've done this for decades, it is utterly amazing what you come up with. But very few people will tell you, well, it depends on the ratio of the rate constants and the equilibrium constant. And graphs like this obviously allow you to do that. So anyway, I've been able to incorporate about maybe 20 mathematical graphs. And I think that they would be very useful. I had them in my old text too. What was so difficult is the software kept changing, but I finally was able to use Sage Math to put them in. It was a steep learning curve. It turns out this is really easy to learn once you finally do it. But now for all of us here, I think perhaps maybe molecular modeling tweaks your bones more. So this is our latest section on the citric acid cycle. And I can show you what I'm trying to do with this. Now, this is just your classical TCA cycle made with ChemDraw. I am working with people, and Carson, I think, is really interested also in interactive figures. Working with people at Virginia Tech, that essentially this will become very interactive. A little bit like KEGG pathways, in which you hover over here and suddenly you will see links to all kinds of materials, including maybe the three-dimensional structure, links to KEGG pathways, links to UniProt, for instance, and also hopefully Protopedia. This is one thing we're hopefully interested in, is getting Protopedia basically intercalated into the book, if you want to say it. The text is nowhere near final. It's only in its beginning stages, but I've decided after many, many years of working with Shine, with JMOL, JSMOL, writing my own JMOL tutorials and JSMOL tutorials, and using things like from Eric and many other people, I decided for this book, and struggling to get those things to work at my own server back home, getting them to work within LibreText, because I'm not in control of the infrastructure, it's been a little daunting. Instead, I've turned to ICN 3D, and it is, for instance, this is the complex, this is citrate synthase. So it's a simple, basically complex oxaloacetate and some of the amino acids surrounding it, acetyl-CoA. It's really easy. I could create this particular image and plug it into the book. Literally now, it used to take me 5 hours. Now it's down to 5 minutes. And of course, we know that's the nature of software. I see Josh kind of laughing, Kristen too. Now, I mean, it's good to have interactive images, and you can click up here and do things with the menu. This same link here, which basically gives the commands to embed in here, goes to the full version of ICN 3D. And I think a lot of people are simply not familiar with this software. It's developed and maintained at the NCBI, and I found it really, really very useful. I plug these in. You can see here is little iron sulfur cluster. I put a lot of these in just to show and tell. This is an example of isocitrate dehydrogenase, looking just at the superposition of the cytosolic and the mitochondrial enzymes, just to show you some of the things you can do. It's really great at doing certain things. And of course, supplementing this, it's not like in a BioChemDex. You can have essentially a visualization, a three-dimensional image for every structure. It would become encyclopedic. We do plan to populate this with higher quality PyMol images. And there's apparently some students at Virginia Tech that are already doing that, I just found out. And then also make them interactive somehow. So anyway, in addition to maybe having some PIMO videos, it's like, and those might have to be layered so that the user is not confronted with a massive amount of information, hence the nature of an interactive diagram or figure in which the user, by maybe clicking, can access more and more information. So for instance, the book doesn't turn into an encyclopedic tome. So basically, that's all I really wanted to say about the book. I see one of my challenges is to conceive this book, bring people on board, and have them working together, to produce something that has these key features: interactivity, good pedagogy. What's missing completely from this presently is problems. It would take me years to come up with all the problems, so hopefully we're going to find people that can create problems, embed problems. I had, in my old version online, I would just pull things from JBC and use it, but now that's not possible because Creative Commons does not extend to those. But again, our goal is to make it as interactive as possible, and hopefully this will be ready in a couple of years. One of the key things that Delmar wants to do, and I would like to do, is intercalate in here, embed in here Protopedia when required and necessary. One wants information available on demand. So for instance, because sometimes the Protopedia and my own tutorials that I've created in the past are so detailed that people can get lost in the minutia and not maybe see the big picture for the details. But that's something I want to talk to the people here, Chaim and Joel and Karsten, about at some point. Delmar is really interested in doing that. So I think I'm just going to stop there and just entertain questions. I have another 14 minutes before my next meeting. I think maybe Kristen has shared my email with everybody. It's been a busy week and I haven't actually returned some emails from you, but any interest in collaborating or any questions or suggestions? Oh God, we're totally interested in collaboration to make this really high quality.
Thanks, Henry. If you just want to stop sharing your screen, I think we'll get the gallery view back.
Okay. All right.
Henry, quick question. Have you gotten like feedback from your students on your prior online textbook?
Yes. When I started it, they hated it for two reasons. One, it was filled with typos and I didn't have a proofing. I was just typing in my own HTML code and everything, and it was horrible. With time, the feedback turned two ways. One, I want a real book, and the other is saying, thank you for putting this there. It was almost like a bimodal distribution. It seems to me, I mean, I love reading books, and I did bring a copy of Stryer with me to New York City. It's the only thing that fit in our car. We came out with the contents of our car. But I think the power of these electronic books is such that they are the future. And I know that you can create a PDF copy of all of this material and print it out if you want, but I just think that the future of these books has got to be, especially as cost ramps up, has to be electronic. But some students liked it, some people didn't,
Okay.
Thanks.
That's, the presentation is really, really interesting. Who is Delmar? I don't know who they are. I feel silly.
Delmar, okay. Delmar Lewis, he's a professor of chemistry at UC Davis. He's a physical chemist, he's a quantum chemist, but I think also he never sleeps because he has a million ideas, and he's been thinking and working. He started coming up with this idea, we need free textbook. So he created LibreText, and the LibreText essentially were chemistry texts that were free. And then he would try to get people to contribute, to write. He knew of my work through my online stuff. He recruited me. And then to get people to use these textbooks solely and not use traditional published text in classrooms anymore. So this has developed into a huge enterprise. He got a like $5 million grant to do this. So he actually has a lot of funds to build this. He's extended to physics and statistics. Sometimes I think he's gone too far, but maybe some people have the ability to partition all this stuff and triage their time. but he's the driving force for this. So he's a younger guy than me and incredible energy.
So, okay, can I ask one other question?
Yeah, yeah.
This may be, you must have been thinking about this. The problem is, you develop all this. Recently, I was trying to look up something, and every article I read was not on this topic. It was looking at just motifs of structures. Every URL I went to, even from 1 year ago, wasn't alive.
Right.
So, but here I'm not worried about the URLs, but you're talking ICN software from the NCBI, which I think is a really nice software also.
Yeah.
How is it going to be? How do you envision over time it's all going to be maintained?
Right.
And I know this problem according to PDF. Periodically, the PDB changes something and the page goes bad. But we now have gotten around all that. But some things are hard and the world changes.
I know, and this is what got me, because I started with Chime, went to JMO, I had to learn JSMO, and I just about panicked. I talked to Delmar about this. He wants very few links, external links in the book. But amongst those people contributing to this book, we feel that some are so important. I've talked to and worked with the people at NCBI, the people that developed ICN 3D. And they said, listen, it's codified into law that we have to maintain this software in perpetuity. That's true, but it's by law we have to provide these resources. Been working with the guy for about 2 years now, and I think it's as stable as one can find. So the kinds of links that we imagine putting in this book. So when I create an ICBN 3D image, there's a short link that's created that goes to a web page at the NCBI. I assume that's going to be stable, but even if it's not, hopefully the software package will be stable. We imagine keeping the links to things like UniProt and KEGG pathways, and just have to hope that those are robust and will last longer than anyone here. That's true.
Well,
But,
maybe, excuse me, maybe they will. But if you remember, before UniProt, there was SwissProt, and all the links to SwissProt are long.
I know,
and
I
are
use that.
gone even when in principle they still exist. So that's a very difficult point. What
It is, and I think, and it can't stop us from continuing, but we have to be really thoughtful about how we approach this. Obviously, one of the other things about a new interactive text like this is that can be absolutely up to date, and which other books can't. So just one last point, there was an article that appeared in PNAS yesterday about these guys that developed 2 enzymes linked by a 12-mer linkage that can basically digest PET, the plastic polymer. So I said, oh my God, this has got to be great. I got to send this link to Kristen and Josh. I got to send it to Sushi as well. I've got to make a model of this and put it online. I started doing it. I had to use Autodoc to try to dock 4-mer oligomer of the PET polymer. And it's like, you can do this stuff as an example. And just parenthetically, before we leave, I want this book also to reflect what we know about biochemistry and climate change as well. So I want to make this book ecologically and sort of from a climate change perspective stand out. We also have people that work on inclusion here, so that there will be a deep sense of inclusion. So everybody, everybody that's been marginalized, all kinds of people will feel that this book represents them as well. So it's a grand project. Our first goal is to get a draft out in 2 years, though.
Okay.
You can see why I lose sleep. No, it's really fun. Go ahead. Yes.
Terrific. It's just terrific.
Thank you. Angela,
I
can you
think-
unmute?
Kirsten and I would be, I think, delighted to find a way to work with you on this, and I think it could fit in. It could fit in really well. Okay. In fact, it could even be some of the problems might be for students to add something to a picture.
Yes,
They can
yes,
count.
yeah.
This is something, because people adding things, that's often how they learn, not just
Yeah.
in some sense, by teaching you learn, and that's in some sense like teaching.
Right. And in fact, basically Del Mar has a lot of students working and contributing as well. And by the way, I've also put in BioMolVis stuff into the book in terms of molecular visualization, and only want to expand that as well. And I want to do that with metabolic diagrams, because just even the arrow, what does an arrow mean in the metabolic diagram? So there's so many things to think about to make this pedagogically sound as well. Yeah, any more questions?
Yeah, Henry, Angel
Yes.
from Spain. Hello,
Yes.
thank you. I fully agree with your views about interactivity and integrating everything in the same container and so on. That's clear. I just have a comment. Apart from the obvious molecular visualization issues, which we share, when you show the interactive graphs of the equations and so on, one idea is the students can play with that, but how do they get anything positive about that? One idea that I kind of push for is to have an activity by the side, like find out this and that by moving the sliders. So there's an aim. I think that's very important, because otherwise it's just a toy.
Right, absolutely. And you know, when I first put my JMOL tutorials and JSML tutorials in my book, it was like, are any students getting anything out of these things? The plan is to do that. We have so much to do, and actually it would be great to have people creating these activities, but that's obvious, because you could change the slider, have them produce something and ask them, okay, which direction is favored? What's the equilibrium constant? Simple things like that would probe their understanding of the simplest graphs, which I really think people struggle with. I'll stay in contact with people, okay? Like I said, after this week, I have a presentation on climate change to a congressional aide at 3 o'clock, so it's been a little busy today, but I'm really grateful to have met you, and we'll definitely stay in contact. And Karsten, I really liked your email about the interactive graphs. There's just so much to think about. I'll be freer next week. So, I think, are we there time-wise? Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
We could probably take one more.
Sure.
I have a comment, Henry, about
Yeah.
printing. So I just have to write a portfolio for myself and was trying to print out Protopedia articles. They have these very nice sliders so that the links in the image stay juxtaposed, but if you want to print it, it's horrible. If I take a screenshot, half the article is not there. And I think you have a similar issue with these interactive materials. So I think as a teacher, it's really nice if some core part of it is still printable, so you can take that with you on a train ride or something like that, if you don't want to have the electronic version.
And I agree with you completely. And I think this is a problem for Del Mar, because I'm not a coder. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, and I just can't spend my time doing that. But he knows that issue, and he's ultimately, like even these rotatable ICM 3D images, how will they appear when it's printed out? I figured there's a coding way to get around that, but I'm going to let somebody else figure that one out. But I agree with you completely.
I mean,
yeah, I agree.
Page numbers, right? Page numbers are good, if I can say, from or section numbers, whatever. But that there's something common, no matter which format you're reading something in, you can still communicate what part the students are responsible for.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, Henry, we'll let you get off to your next meeting. Would you mind if I took a quick screenshot before you left? Everybody just look good for a second. All right, thank you so much.
All right, well, I will see you. Bye. It was great talking and chatting with you,
Henry.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, bye.
Bye.
All right, I'm going to introduce our next speaker now, and maybe a couple people popped in. So I'm Kristen, I'm the director of BioMolVis, and in our workshops, these types of conversations would happen naturally, but with everything being online, I just wanted to get that back a little bit. So I'm also looking to do this again in 2 weeks, and I would love it if anybody wanted to lead an informal presentation, like Henry just pulled up a few tabs and kind of walked us through some things, and really just bring your work to us and show us some new stuff and start a conversation about it with people that are enthusiastic about this sort of thing. So anyone, just shoot me an email at the BioMolVis if you got that from the newsletter, or my personal email if you have that is fine too. So next we have Karsten Theus. He's from Westfield State College. We're working on a collaboration with Proteopedia. It's in the early stages, but I've been chatting a lot with Karsten. And so he's gonna talk a little bit about teaching with Proteopedia, and I'll leave it to him.
Great, thanks. Before I start, I want to share a joke with you guys. When my wife and I got married, she was very frustrated with my last name. And so we say Tice like nice. I don't do that with my students. I say Tice like rice. And it's actually my name for Wikipedia. If you see Tice like rice, that's me. So that's just a little.
I knew I was going to murder your last name because I said I've never spoken this aloud. So thank you so much.
It has a TH that we ignore, and then it has the vowel sound that's different than you would think. I'm doing exactly the same as Henry. I have tabs on a browser. I just have to find it. So everybody can see the screen. Everybody can hear me. This project actually was initiated by Chaim and by Joel when they said, "Hey guys, can't you write a paper?" And we said, "Sure, we can." So this is about how different people have used Protopedia in teaching. And I think all I'm showing here is right out of Protopedia. So this is my agenda here. We found that people used Protopedia in different ways. They gave reading and viewing assignments, like reading a textbook, but a little bit more interactive, maybe even more interactive than Henry's Future Lineage or text map. You can be the judge of that. Then there's something I call critical viewing. So that goes up after what we just discussed. You can't just give students material, but you have to give them some guidance what they're supposed to do with that. Okay, so these are assignments where you read something and then you have to work with it, critically assess it. And the last one is writing and coding assignments. Writing is obvious. You can write a article on a biochemical topic and post it on Protopedia. Coding, I say, it doesn't have to be coding. You can use something called the scene editing or SAT to make scenes. But then I had one project with students where we wanted to do a couple of things that were beyond the basics that are provided there. And then we did have to write some JMOL code as well. Okay, so I'll jump right in. Some of these are from projects I did with my own students, and some of them are from other people. So if you assign something to read, you probably first have to explain how Protopedia works. And I made a viewing guide. That's one of the articles here that gives you a brief overview of how these work. And for those of you who don't use Protopedia, I will just say one or two things about it. It looks like an encyclopedia article. I'm to blame for the yellow thing because one thing in the viewing guide didn't work. So we just updated the JMOL browser. What makes these different is that this is a interactive kind of display. So you can rotate this, you can click on here, gives you the residue numbers and so on. Okay, so the way you read an article is you read through the text, and whenever you come to one of these green links, you click on there, and then the scene changes, the caption, if there's a caption, changes, and you can read about it. So I compared this to a tourist guide who brings you to the best spots in town, but then you're not in the bus and you drive off, but you're actually on the ground and you can look at it and explore it, right? And then you get to the next kind of spot that's interesting about this protein. This just goes back to the original one. And then you can look again, and there's some guidance there. So it's this combination of you get some guidance, and then if you want to explore further, you can. Okay. This guide has how to use the mouse, how to use the JMOL menu. So there's some extra things you can get from the menu if you right click or control click. And so students should know that before they look at the first article. Okay. Protopedia has a way of adding quizzes to articles. So this is an article about an alpha helix I wrote a couple years ago. And so again, you would read this, you click on the green links, you get the content. There's also some stuff that doesn't have visualization attached to it. Let me just walk you through some of these. So I have to admit, all the figures I do, I have some kind of model that I go after. And here these were from Straya's textbook. One thing, if you click on the hyperlink, I would open a new tab. Otherwise, this whole thing has to reload again. That's kind of annoying. So that's a suggestion for usage. So these are the different images that Straya has about alpha helices. Shows the cartoon, shows the hydrogen bonding, shows the helix from the top, so you get a sense of how many turns you have, how many amino acids per turn. But then it also shows you a space filling one, so that you don't get the wrong impression that this is like a toilet paper roll where you can look through. It's actually space filled. It's very close packing of the atoms. Okay. And so I have the same color coding, all stolen from Straya. And I have an animation where you can actually make this big enough so it's space filling, and you can see that there's no space in the middle. And I would recommend that you have good examples of high quality figures to start out with. So you can keep things at high quality, but make it interactive, right? The Straya figure does not have the ability to look from two sides, but here they can do that. So there's an added value there. Okay, I don't know if you know about alpha helices, but if you read this, you should be able to do the quiz. The quiz is just for fun. It gives you answers immediately. So what level of structure does alpha helix refer to? Tertiary structure. And then I can submit it, and it tells me, no, I was wrong. Sorry. It's actually secondary structure. So it's low stakes assessment, but you can just check yourself if you got something out of it, and then go back and look at it to see it. Okay. So let's get back to our agenda. So this would be a typical reading and viewing assignment, or you could have a formative assessment and ask some quiz questions afterwards, so that students really know what they're supposed to get out of it. And you know whether they did get out of it because they took the little quiz. Okay. Working on Protopedia, I have a special focus on the figures, which goes with the BioMolViz. I feel you can learn how to write at other places too, but this is kind of a speciality to make these interactive figures. And so I made a rubric. Let me see if that's up here already. Yes. So I was asking people to look at an article that already existed. I started out with high quality articles that already got a nod from BAMBET, Biochemistry and Molecular Biology Education Journal. And I'll show you one in a second, but I also gave my students a rubric. So there's one rubric about articles, which we can skip and go straight to the figures. So I have these 5 categories, and see how they map with the BioMolViz kind of framework. A picture should have a rich content. It should be clear. The figures should flow. So one figure should connect to the next figure. If you show an overview and then zoom in, it should have the same color coding and so on, so you don't get lost. There should be support there. So I'm pushing for having all figures with captions. That's not the case. I don't know when the caption was invented, but now it's mature, and you can put a caption on every scene. Then you can put labels directly in the figure. And the question is, do you know what the color scheme means? And the last one is, I guess, my favorite. So I'm really fond of the Kinemage style diagrams where you can turn things on and off, make the image clearer, or you can add some extra stuff. And so I've been working on giving some good examples how you can do that in the Protopedia platform. So it switches buttons and also prompts to just say, find the active site. You can make a little assignment about that. Find the active site, zoom in, take a picture of it. That's your proof that you found it. Okay, and the last column has a couple of pet peeves that I think I share with some of the people who are here today. So I know Eric Martz gets mad if the figure is not centered, because if you rotate it, suddenly what you're interested in goes out of the view, and it's very annoying. Everybody else is annoyed by that too. So this is what I'm asking the students to check. Okay, so here's an example. Somebody chose ricin as their example, and I asked them to assess this article based on mostly the figures. And you can see this was featured in 2013. It might be slightly different now, but you can go back to that version if you're interested what the featured article looked like. Okay, and I put the student work with permission into the discussion here. So that's one mechanism to sort of annotate the articles. So this was Abigail Schoner. Here are the questions I asked: what's your favorite figure? And she liked one of the detail figure. Suggestion for a figure legend. There's an example. We could put that in now, right? If we like it, somebody could edit the article and put the figure legend in there. What I like about the figure, it shows 2 carbohydrates and how the residue interact with it. Then I asked them to look up the corresponding figure in the primary citation. There was one. And then how do you think the figure could be improved? And she said, you should show the hydrogen bonds. And not everybody who writes these articles knows how to show hydrogen bonds. And so that's one of my goals as a member of the editorial board, to make those tools available, that there will be an article, how to put hydrogen bonds into my figure. Okay, and then here's the primary references and another reference. So this was the result of that assignment to make this. Okay, so this was about reading and critically reading articles, and hopefully it also results in improving the quality of existing articles by making some suggestions. And if somebody really feels strongly about it, they can become, they can get a login to Protopedia and do the editing themselves. Okay, writing and coding assignments. I quickly want to show it's not up here anymore, so let's just click on it. An article written by a student. So all of these articles, you can see the list of authors on the bottom. Emily Street has graduated a long time ago, a student of Jason Telford's, who had this as an assignment in the class. And I learned something from it. I didn't know about Abrin. It's actually related to ricin in some ways. There's some bioterrorism twist to it. Lots of good content here. So actually adds to Protopedia. With this article, because that's sort of what I'm focusing on, I'm sure you could make better scenes, so you can prove it, but that's what happens in the Wikipedia, right? Everybody can help. So if somebody finds time and says, oh, I want to showcase the interesting details in the text in my figures better, then somebody could take that on and improve it. Okay. The last thing I want to share is a project I did in a lab, where I didn't ask students to do a complete article, but I asked them to do one single figure in a group of 3. But we really wanted to get all the bells and whistles. And so before I show you that, I just want to quickly show you the images that were in the original research paper. This is an open source journal, so you can actually use them. We could have even put them into the Protopedia to compare. You see they're high quality, they have shading and everything, they have good labels, it's done by professionals. So those are good models, but of course they're not 3D. And so we put them together here in this article, so you can probably recognize that image again. But now you can interact with it. You can look at it from different sides. I want to get one example before I close where this is important. This is for comparing structures. So I have the structure on the left here that I can rotate on the right, but I want to show you a related protein called ULP1. It's also an alpha beta alpha sandwich. It has the same catalytic triad that's not shown here. But it's kind of difficult to see it. There's this beta sheet you have to rotate it a bit about, and then you want to know if the alpha helices match up. And so you probably want to change the view a bit. This yellow bit is what's different. So this has a big loop with an alpha helix here. This is a short loop. And this one's bound to substrate. This one was before they had the substrate complex, so they're making arguments about it. Okay. So that's one technique to have the static image here and the other one here, and then you can try to superpose them by hand, so to speak. One of the innovations that we have here that we didn't see much on Protopedia, but is becoming more common, is to show electron density. So this takes a while. Oh, it's already there, but it's out of sequence. So see if this is loading now. There we go. So this is the structure they solved, and here's the electron density coming in. And to show this a bit brighter, here's with the background. So you can discuss electron density with students. This is also new from the protein database. They didn't used to have that much information about structure factors, but now it's pretty common that people post their structure factors so you can get density. Last thing I want to show is a superposition and these interactive elements. So this is superposition. It's kind of messy. There's the green structure and the gray structure. I don't know if you even can tell them apart, but now there's some buttons here so you can turn one off. This is the structure they solved. This is the comparison structure. You want to compare it because the comparison structure has the substrate in it, covalently bound, and here are both. So you can sort of go back and forth between these buttons and make sense of it. So you can orient yourself again, and then you can add the complexity and compare them. Okay, that's all I have. So different ways of using Protopedia in teaching, either for quick assignments to learn content, or then delving deeper into critically assessing the biomolecular visualization or making your own. Okay, I can stop sharing the screen and open it for discussion.
So Karsten, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to start doing projects with their students and creating Protopedia pages? Where should I begin?
I would start with taking an article that you think adds to the content that you already have and using that as a 3D supplement, much like Henry was describing. That would mean that if you find a high quality article, you get to know what's possible in Protopedia. You get the mechanics of the links and how it feels like writing this in a way that the figures and the text synergize with each other. And I guess you also learn how your students respond to that. So that I would do the first semester. And then you probably get frustrated that there's an article missing, and then I would probably write one on my own. So you get the feeling of making those scenes. And then maybe in the third semester, if you want to do something, I was very happy with offering it in the lab because I had 3 hours of time. I had groups working on it, and I could go from one group to the next and troubleshoot things. But they could also work on it independently. So I guess that would be my suggestion, to sort of ramp it up. First, get used to the platform and see what the content is that's already there. Then make your own, and then have your students make their own.
I've got a quick technical question. This is Alberto. Are there stubs of pages so you don't have to worry about the technical aspects? And specifically, how difficult is it to plug in JSMall, not only in Protopedia pages, but maybe even our own course pages.
Okay, one question at a time, I guess. So there is a stub that gives you a template for structuring your article and for having references and for having a window with the JMOL open. And then as the first step, you just have to plug in the correct PDB identifier, and then it becomes the figure that you need in its most basic form. And then you can add on to that, making scenes that show the different aspects of the structure you want to see. I see Joel nodding, so if you want to chime in and add something to that. Adding a scene to your own website is very easy. I would probably first write it in Protopedia on a sandbox or something like that. And then JMOL provides a state file, it's called, and so you can pull the whole thing over and have the scene on your website pretty quickly. Did I answer that question, Alberto? Oh, there it is. Yes, I did. Great.
I wanted to make a comment about you mentioned a quiz. You showed us a quiz in Proteopedia. It's very easy to make those quizzes. And an interesting experience I've had is a little over 2 years ago, I created a tutorial on the Ramachandran principle. And I then converted it into a YouTube video. The YouTube video has been by far the most popular of the 3 different modes, one of which is in Proteopedia that I provided. It's currently, well, not currently, over an average of over 2 years, it's been viewed 40 times a day. And I made a quiz in Proteopedia to supplement that. So when you watch the YouTube video at the end, it says, if you want to see a quiz, look at the link below. And that's getting on average 34 trials a day. So it's very interesting how the synergy between YouTube, which of course is a very popular place for people to look up information, and then providing the quiz. Now these quizzes, of course, are not for grading purposes, they're for preparation for a more conventional assessment of some sort. So the student can run the quiz as many times as they want, very quickly, as you showed, get feedback as to whether they've got most of it right or not. So anyways, it's worked out very well, that synergy between the Proteopedia quiz mechanism and YouTube video.
Yeah, earlier we were talking about changing technologies. And so for some of the kinemages, I was hoping that somebody made a YouTube walking us through it. I think that's one mechanism how you protect yourself. I don't need the kinemage actually to work, but I need to have the pedagogical ideas still preserved, right? And so if, for instance, Eric, somebody walks through the Ramachandran principle tutorial, as you did in the YouTube video, even if they want to change platforms, all the great ideas you had about how to teach it are still there. And also if somebody something needs Java and you can't open it up anymore on your browser, then you still know what this activity was about. So you sort of preserve it a bit.
So the quizzes, they give, correct and incorrect. Are there any other options with the quizzes to maybe show like a hint for a wrong answer, anything like that?
I haven't explored it so much, but I mean, the other thing you can do is have the material on Protopedia and then use the more sophisticated learning management systems to write the quiz, right? And then you're not sharing the quiz, of course, so it's not accessible. But if you want to do something fancy, you can also have that combination.
You can provide hints, and also when the person taking the quiz asks for the feedback, you can provide additional information about the answer, justifying the answer, links to resources that would illustrate it, and so forth.
And I guess, Eric, you asked some questions in your video and all the answers are on that page too, I saw. Or maybe it's the answers to questions you asked on anyway, there was additional information on that quiz that I didn't expect, which referred back to the other source.
Alberto?
chat going on?
I already asked my question.
Oh, okay, your hand was still up. I just noticed it now.
Oh, and
Anyone
my
else have any questions?
comments on the chat.
Maybe it's just be mentioned for those of you who haven't ever actually authored anything in Proteopedia, that there are a set of videos that illustrate each of many processes you can go through depending on what your goals are. And they're in Proteopedia. So you can easily look up and watch those videos to get a sense of how to go about things.
I just signed up for my account and it sent me the links. And so I've been watching through those videos.
And the videos are also stored on YouTube. It's very easy to embed a YouTube inside a Proteopedia.
I just want to
And
show
you
one
can
more thing.
actually embed the video to complement your interactive structure.
That's right. And sometimes it's useful that way. And of course, it has sound as well.
I wanted to show you one more of the more sophisticated images because I think it's helpful for students. And before I do that, you think the dark green and the light green structures are related? What do you think? So this animates the superposition, and my students always don't understand what it means. They think it was necessarily crystallized in the same thing, and not that it's a mathematical operation to see if they're the same or not. So this superposes the two, and then you can see that they match up, and then you can separate them again. So there's some things I always wished for I could show as an animation, and it turns out I can actually make them myself. And this is what I mean with the interactive elements.
Right. That's the advantage over a movie, because you can rotate it while it's superimposing in some sense.
Right, I can put the spin on, and then I think I can still superimpose them. It stops and then it spins again. No, it stopped spinning. Never mind. And I did make a little thing about how to put in these interactive things. So I think I showed you the buttons. There's also something called checkboxes. So if I want to turn ATP on and off, I can quickly do that. And the other thing I want to show you that I really like is in this lysozyme article. Oops, that was one click too many. Oh, I can also showcase this. So this is an animated GIF. You can't manipulate this, but it's the first picture that comes up that signals already it's going to be three-dimensional. And then this has time to load. So what I wanted to show you here is instead of having a caption, you can use these interactive elements to show what part is what. So carbohydrates, it has a little sun after it, and there it lights up. Did you see that? And then I can light up the disulfide bonds, so they get a little bit fatter, so you can see where the carbon, the cysteines are linked. And then I have one that's kind of fun, tracing the chain. So it starts at the N terminus and goes to the C terminus. So you can follow this sequence through the three-dimensional structure. So those are nice interactive elements. And then another one I wanted to show. Let's turn the spin off here, make this a bit bigger. This is always the same picture, but colored differently. So this is colored by hydrophobicity. This is colored by charge. And there's a little map here. Negative is red, positive is blue. This is colored by conservation. This takes a while to load because it goes from offsite. The blue ones are variable and the red ones are conserved. So you can sort of guess where the active site is. It's not going to be here, but there's a cleft here and suddenly it becomes very conserved. So that's where the active site is. And the last one I already showed is colored by hydrophobicity. The hydrophobicity I love because if I now turn off have the backbone just as a line, and now I can go back and forth between all side chains, the hydrophilic side chains and the hydrophobic side chains. So this is the hydrophobic side chains and the hydrophilic side chains. So it's very obvious what's going on here. And one of the things that drives folding is exactly that. I have to say that I cheated a bit. So for my hydrophobic side chains, I limited it to methionine, cysteine, leucine, valine, isoleucine, phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan. And for the hydrophilics, I have hydrophilic and proline. This is something that's confusing to students. They think proline is all hydrophobic, should be in the center. But on the other hand, it's a helix breaker and a sheet breaker and is often in turns. So that makes it be on the surface. It would be nice to have another button that shows the just the prolines, I mean, to convince you. But you could also teach your students how to do that. So somewhere here are prolines. And so I should be able to select the protein by amino acids. If I find it right now. By residue name, there it is, proline. So now they're selected and I can put the selection halos on here. Come on, open them up. So I have 14 things selected and here they are. So those are the prolines up here. And they're indeed right on the surface of the protein. Okay, so that was a little bit more show and tell about interactive elements. And as I showed, there's an article that gives you a starting point how to put them into your figures.
Well, thank you so much, Karsten. We're at the end of our hour. If anybody wants to stick around for a minute and ask a final question. But thank you so much for coming out, and please consider leading one of these, even if I know today was really impressive, but even just like what you're doing, if you're teaching online right now and strategies you're using, I know that people are interested in talking about those sorts of things. So shoot me an email if you're interested, and I hope to see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Karsten.
Sure.
Thank you both. Thank you, Kristen and Karsten, very much. Really, very, very, very good.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day and stay well.
Okay, bye.
Bye, take care.
So Kristen, do you have 5 minutes to tell me?
Sure, yeah.
The ideas are with Protopedia? Because I'm slightly out of the loop, but it was good to be out of the loop because I was writing my portfolio. So that's
Let's see. I don't have that. Let's see. I don't know if I have those notes handy. I guess it'd be in the BioMolViz book. Let me see if this is it. I have like different books for everything now, and I don't know. Sometimes it makes me more organized and sometimes less. Yeah, so we had a good conversation and we were talking about just action items for where to go next. And we talked about the table of contents of Proteopedia, and like there is one, but Joel thought it was kind of lacking. Yes, that things might be organized in a more instructive, pedagogically sound way.
I would use stronger words. I end up Googling everything. So
yeah, same.
And then I find stuff. So navigation is not my favorite.
So what I was thinking, since I'm working on a curriculum design right now, and I'm working with a lot of the instructors that teach the foundations, which is our majors biochemistry, kind of like trying to, we found out that everybody's teaching it a little bit differently and we want, well, a lot differently. And actually, let me stop recording.